I'm going to speak briefly, and then I'll introduce the legislators. A couple of the legislators will speak, and then we'll open everything up to questions. So.
And just a reminder for everybody who speaks, particularly the non-lawmakers, introduce yourself, and if you could spell your name, because there's graphics that will appear on screen.
Sure.
In front of you. So.
Yes. So welcome, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name is Justin Norton Kurtzen. That's JUSTIN NORTON hyphen KERTSON. So yeah, my name is Justin Norton Kurtzen. I'm a representative for 15 Now Oregon, which is the organization that is running the 15 Now campaign here in the state of Oregon, where here in Oregon, business and the economy have been growing for more than the past decade at 3 times the national rate. Yet, working people in our state are falling further and further behind as wages stagnate. A recent report by the Labor Education Research Center out of the University of Oregon shows that almost 200,000 working people in our state are on public assistance because they make so little. And that costs taxpayers in Oregon over $1.7 billion per year. But almost 70 labor and community organizations and statewide coalitions, 15 of our state representatives and senators have decided to take a stand and to act on the moral value that no one should live in poverty. No one who works should live in poverty by working together to make Oregon the first state to pass a $15 minimum wage. Our bill, which has been submitted in the House, HB 2009, and will be submitted in the Senate at the end of this week, raises Oregon's minimum wage to $15 per hour over a 3-year phase-in starting January 1st, 2016. The idea of a $15 minimum wage has inspired a nationwide movement of fast food and retail workers, convenience store workers, home care workers, school employees, city and state workers, all who are fighting for a better quality of life for low-wage workers. But 15 is not just an arbitrary number here in the state of Oregon. In fact, a number of studies have been published over the past year, some within just the past month, all of which point to 15 as the right number when it comes to raising Oregon's minimum wage. $9.25 just isn't enough, and neither is 12 or 13. But $15 per hour is the number that gets working families in Oregon out of poverty and off public assistance. It saves taxpayers money, and it gives low-wage working people here in Oregon the respect and the dignity that all working people deserve. So we invite all of the Oregon to join with us, to take this stand with us, and decide that no one in our state who works will live in poverty. We invite you to fight with us for a $15 minimum wage in Oregon, so together we can lift our whole state up. So now we'll hear from some of the legislative leaders on this issue. 4 of our sponsors have joined us today. We have Senator Chip Shields, as well as Representatives Ann Leininger, Lou Frederick, Peter Buckley, and that's all, right?
That's what we got.
That's who's here. So I'd like to turn it over to Senator Chip Shields.
Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Chip Shields, and I represent North and Northeast Portland in the Oregon State Senate. I am proud to have drafted the Senate bill for $15 an hour minimum wage at the request of 15 Now Coalition. I stand here for one very straightforward reason, that people in my district want a chance, not charity, and this bill will help them achieve that. People want a chance to work hard and take care of their family without relying on state assistance. It's the sad and simple truth that our current minimum wage does not allow people to cover the cost of their family's basic needs. And public assistance, while it's an important safety net, it should be there to help and support the most vulnerable. So I say to you this, people in my district want a chance, not charity. They want living wages, not food boxes, and increasing the minimum wage will help accomplish that. Thank you very much.
Okay, Representative Peter Buckley.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm proud to stand with my colleagues to make a stand on working people being able to survive in the state of Oregon. I represent South Jackson County Legislature. I'm also the House co-chair of the Joint Committee on Ways and Means. And I've been in that position for 6 years as we come out of the recession, and we've struggled every single year to come up with the funding for the basic services to keep people alive in our state, for housing, for health care, the food stamp program. I think as a whole, our state is tired of this pattern, and I know that that in terms of where we are in a budget, we are definitely at the end of what we can do. We need to move forward with an economy that works for all Oregonians. The president, in his State of the Union address, talked about middle-class economics. And middle-class economics does work. I think if you look at the states that have practiced middle-class economics, investing in working families and helping people into the middle class, those are the economies that work. Oregon's economy is starting to kick into drive, and it's because we're getting more jobs back and we're starting to see increases in pay. But we need to take a bold step. This is a bold step over the next 3 years. It does have an impact. But we're asking people, we're asking workers, we're asking businesses to come together to find the way to change this tide of the increasing economy and lower wages for workers. The fast food workers in our state, I stand behind them 100% in their desire to be paid decently for their work. Again, the concept is simple. If you work for a living, you should be able to survive. If you look back on the original minimum wage when it was created, President Roosevelt was very clear. The minimum wage is just that. It's the minimum that a worker should receive in order to have the basic necessities of life. And that's what we're asking for here, over a 3-year period, to raise the minimum wage in steps over the next 3 years to get workers a chance so they can take care of themselves, take care of their families, have the basic necessities of life. That's what a minimum wage should be, and that's what we're calling for. Thank you. I'll stand up by you.
Okay, and Representative Ann Leininger has a statement as well.
Earlier this summer, I was in a sandwich shop on the east side of Portland. And as I walked in, the woman behind the counter was talking to a friend of hers who was a customer. And she was saying, you know, I'm trying to get all the hours I can possibly get. I'm working as much as I can. I never stay home, even if I'm feeling sick, because I need the money. And still, I can barely make it by. I can barely make it by. She was being very candid with her friend, and I ordered my sandwich, and I was saying about what she said. And after I placed my order, I said, you know, I'm a state representative, and I heard what you said, and it matters a lot. And I want you to know that when I go to Salem next session, I'm going to be working on some legislation to help people who are working hard all day long make sure that they can get enough money to take care of themselves and their families and live decently, you know, because it's the morally right thing for us to do. And Oregonians are decent people. Oregonians care about one another. We've heard a lot of great stuff from Pope Francis recently. I don't know if anyone else here has appreciated stuff he said, but he's talked a lot about how it's important that we not have a society in which some people do spectacularly well and other people can't make it by at all. And I totally agree with him. But you don't have to be Pope Francis to recognize that it's important for us to make sure that people who work hard all day long can live in dignity and take care of themselves and their families. And that's why I'm standing with this coalition, and I encourage other people in our state to support this measure to move us to a $15 minimum wage over a 3-year phase-in. Thank you.
Bringing the Pope in. Way to go, Ian.
Well, yeah.
Presbyterians for Pope Francis.
Representative Chris Gorsuch was hoping to be here. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to make it, but he sent a statement that he would like us to read. So Representative Gorsuch says, "Too many Oregon workers are working harder than ever and are still paid so little that they have to depend on public benefits. Increasing the minimum wage isn't just the right thing to do for workers, it's the right thing to do for taxpayers." So, at this point, if nobody else has anything they would like to say, Representative Frederick?
I hadn't planned on it, but sure.
Sure. Awesome. Great.
The eminent philosopher Chris Rock said that minimum wage just tells, if someone is paying you the minimum wage, it just tells you that if they would pay you a lot less if it wasn't against the law. That's the kind of approach that takes place. I have folks within my community, within my family, who are working minimum wage. They cannot really afford barely housing, never mind anything else, and putting savings away. This is an important factor. It will bring up the whole community in a way that I think we're long overdue to be dealing with. So I'm very much in favor of this, and we need to work on it and make sure that the whole community is actually getting a chance to work and work well. and live well. Because what we want to do is look forward and say, what would Oregon look like in 10 years if we can do this right? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So at this point, we'd like to open it up to questions if anybody has any questions.
Justin, you said 12 or 13 isn't enough, but if those numbers were necessary to get the bill out of the building as opposed to 15, are you willing to entertain that discussion?
We stand firmly behind the idea that $15 is what is necessary for people in Oregon to meet their basic needs. 12 and 13 is not enough, and in 15 now we're dedicated to fighting for a $15 minimum wage and nothing less.
What would you say to small business owners who struggle themselves and oftentimes make less than their minimum wage employees?
Sure. We're all very concerned about small businesses, local businesses. They're dear to our heart here in Oregon. But it's natural, I think, to worry about small businesses when we're making big policy decisions like this. But study after study of actual minimum wage increases show that in states with higher minimum wages, small businesses particularly, they actually thrive and they grow faster in states that have higher minimum wages than states that have lower minimum wages. There are studies that actually show that business failure rates actually drop in the year of and after a minimum wage increase, and that higher minimum wage increases actually correlate with lower business failure rates than do smaller increases. So while I share the concern that we all have for our state's small businesses, but the reality is that minimum wage is good for business. It means more money in more people's hands, and when people have more money to spend, they spend more money, and spending increases, demand goes up, and that's good for our businesses and it's good for our economy.
Small businesses are saying that in order to do something like this, and this may be for the lawmakers to answer here, but that this would increase the cost of what they were providing the public, and that people like senior citizens who are on a fixed income would see their costs going up, but they wouldn't see any increase in their income. What do you say to senior citizens who have that concern?
Sure. There's always that balancing act of trying to figure out what's kind of the sweet spot of trying to make sure the economy works for the most people possible. And anytime there's a change, it shifts it slightly. As was mentioned, the minimum wage has shown that it boosts the economy. But people who are on fixed income, seniors, will still have to be dependent on government programs to make sure they have access to basic needs, to make sure that happens. But this change has to happen. If we keep going in the same direction we have now, we're going to have more seniors joining the retirement age with far more limited resources year after year after year. So there has to be a change, and there has to be a way to balance it. And the way to balance it is with a public-private approach, with on the public sector, making sure that people that work for a living make enough money to survive and take care of their families, thus taking less tax dollars for social programs. Those tax dollars can then be used for education, which helps fuel the economy. They can also be used to make sure that people who are on limited income have the basic services they need to survive.
But the money that Social Security, somebody who's living off Social Security wouldn't see their income increase because that's a federal thing.
Correct.
The state would see, you'd see maybe the prices at the restaurants and grocery store go up.
That's correct, but the state does have the ability to address health care needs in terms of assisting people who are in the Medicaid program on a limited income. The state does have an ability to help seniors on limited income have a decent life. And that would be the role that the state would have to play in cooperation with the federal government to make sure that we're lifting everybody up. I think it's unacceptable for any of us to say we're going to let some segment of our population drop. And what we've done in the last several decades is we've let the lower income workers, we've let them and their families drop, and we've let seniors drop for the most part. We've got to balance that out. We've got to figure a way to balance that out so no segment of our population is impacted negatively from a rising economy, which should be benefiting all of us.
So tax reform would perhaps be easier under a minimum wage of $15 an hour?
You know, that's a great theory. No one's proposed that. Tax reform's never seemed easy. But I think, you might be able to have an argument. I think what our state needs to do is to have these discussions to say, what's fair taxation? What's fair wage? What does it mean to have a middle-class economy? These are all things that we have to wrestle with. We've done a fairly good job in Oregon in a lot of different areas. We're doing great, I think, in terms of how we're changing healthcare delivery. We are able to wrestle with really complex issues and get to a good outcome. And we need to do that with our economy as well. We need to focus on the economy to acknowledge, first off, we are not taking care of all segments of our population at this point. We have hundreds of thousands of Oregonians who are falling into this cycle, this downward cycle of poverty, not being able to get out. We've got to reverse that, and I think we're capable of doing that.
Representative Buckley.
Yeah.
Dick Hughes from the Statesman Journal. I'd like to give you a couple real-life examples and ask you to respond to them. You have members of your own caucus who have said they would have to lay off workers or reduce hours if the minimum wage goes up. You have a young entrepreneur, a couple, 3 blocks from here, running a restaurant who moved in with her parents to save money, but yet they have hired homeless people to work in the restaurant, even though they're not as well trained, because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
They may not be able to do that if this goes up. Regardless of what studies show, in the same way that studies show that government workers are overpaid or underpaid, depending upon the study, what do you say to these real-life people who think they're going to have to cut hours or cut employees, and that rips them apart?
I say engage in this process. Engage in this process with us. Let's have a discussion. What does it mean if we take it up to $11.50 in 2016? What does that mean for your business? Would you have to raise prices to a certain extent to cover that? Where would those price increases go? Could you still, do you think, operate at that level of business if you were paying that additional minimum wage of $11.50 in 2016? Is there a business plan that's feasible that would have a graduated increase in the minimum wage over 3 years that would work? Come talk to us. Come get these examples on the table. Let's wrestle with them. Let's try to figure out how this can work. People have got to be willing, I think, to look at both sides of it. Again, on how much their product is going to cost. Are they going to price themselves out of the market? Let's take a look at what those are. I met with 2 local business people before I came here this week. One runs a coffee shop, one runs a movie theater. And we talked through, okay, what would actually happen to your budget? What would happen to you in terms of, for the movie theater owner, how high would you increase ticket prices if you had to cover this additional thing? And so he was wrestling with that, and he's going to come back to me. He's going to say, look, we'd have to do ticket prices from whatever it is now, $7.50 for the matinee. It might have to go to $8.50. How would that impact your business? And those are the discussions we have to enter into.
Has anybody done any estimates on how this will affect the tax base?
They're not that I'm aware of. I don't know if anybody else has the information on that, though we do know it's part of the discussion in terms of both on the positive side, hopefully you'd have a little bit more income tax coming in, but also there's a cost to the state as well, because we have to make sure we contract with a number of nonprofits that pay the minimum wage to their workers, and so it'd be additional costs for the state for services as well. So that is something we're going to have to wrestle with.
Okay. The employee that's making $9.25 an hour today, the day after he starts making $15 an hour, will he make a jump in the tax rate at such a level that it will just pull him back to making less money?
Again, this is a graduated step up over 3 years, and I believe they're still making, and you might have answered, I don't know if you do or not, but they're making basically just above the poverty line, so they would not be jumping up, at least in Oregon taxes. I'm not sure about the federal taxes. I'll have to go into that.
Talking about Senate Bill 332, repealing the state preemption. Is this kind of a backup plan, or what's the idea with this?
No, I mean, it's not really a backup plan. I mean, again, sort of $15 an hour being sort of the baseline that is necessary for a person to get by without being on public assistance in Oregon. We really feel that we not only need to raise the minimum wage to $15 statewide, but that moving forward, this preemption law needs to be repealed so that places in the state, like the larger metropolitan areas, Portland, for example, are able to, in the future, raise their minimum wage even higher without having to rely on the state to do it. Because the fact is that there are more expensive places places than others to live in the state. And that preemption law really cripples the ability of cities and counties to improve the quality of lives for the people that work in those cities. And aside from that, it really, Oregon has home rule sort of ingrained in its constitution. And at 15 now, we really feel that these preemption laws sort of fly in the face of that home rule in general, and the idea that local politics and decision makers should sort of be the final say on local issues.
Speaker Kotek has said she's against different minimum wages in different cities. Do you think it's politically possible to pass something like that?
We'll see. I know that Speaker Kotek herself has started to move a little bit from that position in the last week. She, at a town hall just this past Saturday in North Portland, actually talked about preemption as a possible solution to the minimum wage problem in Oregon. So, she hasn't made up her mind in terms of what she's going to do on the minimum wage or preemption, but we're certainly engaging in that conversation with her and hoping that she'll do the right thing.
If you simply repeal the preemption, could you hypothetically have a city set it at lower than the state, like revert down to the federal?
No, minimum wage is minimum wage. The preemption law will only allow localities to raise the minimum wage higher than the state level.
Have you done an analysis of how this affects overall wage structures? If you bump up the minimum wage over $5, that bumps everybody else's wage within the organizational structure, or it should.
Right.
Particularly in healthcare, either by a percentage basis or the $5.
Right.
So that increases the whole cost much more than the minimum wage.
Right.
Plus
Yeah.
the payroll taxes and things like that.
Yeah, so I know this. I don't believe that an analysis has actually been done on what the wage compression effect will be in Oregon. But I know that it's a conversation that is happening, a pretty robust conversation right now in Portland, where Mayor Hales recently announced plans to start moving some workers, city workers and contract workers to 15. And so that conversation about what's going to happen to the people who already make 15 or 16, and how they're going to move up and when and how much. It's a big conversation that's happening in the Portland area right now, and I'm sure it will happen in Oregon too. I know that we feel ultimately that this is a good thing. I mean, it's one of the benefits of raising the minimum wage is that it raises, when you raise the floor, it raises everybody else up as well. And wages have been stagnant for decades, not just for minimum wage workers, but for working class people in general. And it's really one of our hopes that by raising the bar of the minimum wage, that we'll also raise the bar for other people as well.
Doesn't that just keep the inequality the same, because the person who's making $150 an hour, I've never experienced that, but the person who is bumped up proportionally too.
Sure, and I guess I would say that, the idea of this is not so much to ensure that everybody makes the same amount of money. The idea of raising the minimum wage is to ensure that those who are at the bottom of the pay scale are able to pay for the basic necessities, to house their children and feed them, and pay their bills. It's not necessarily a redistribution scheme that's meant to equalize pay across the board.
So, but if prices then go up, how does it help them?
How does it help who? I'm sorry.
If the prices go up for the products,
Sure.
for the services, for the buses, whatever it may be, how does that help them? My question, I guess, is, are there other solutions? You've hit on an important point, but
Sure.
are there other solutions out there?
There are a lot of other solutions, and I think that they're all important. Raising the minimum wage is not the only thing that needs to be done to ensure a good quality of life for working people. Paid sick leave. Even things like single-payer health care, which would be great for working people and for businesses. All of these things are things that need to be discussed. Better retirement plans that are guaranteed for working people. There are a lot of things that need to be done, and minimum wage is a part of that. But we certainly don't pretend that it's the be-all and end-all of solutions. Yeah.
You talked a lot about the people who are trying to raise family on minimum wage and trying to get by in society. There's a lot of people who make the minimum wage that have somebody else supporting them, some children or spouses sometimes are that way. Say that they're going to get a pay increase here. Some business may lay off some people to tighten up their payroll. What do you say to them, people who are worried about those jobs going away?
Well, again, I mean, overall, we just don't really see large employment losses in any way when minimum wages are raised. I mean, the scale of employment loss when minimum wage goes up is so small that it's basically determined to be statistically insignificant, statistically zero. And so, ultimately, it doesn't matter whether someone is a teenager or maybe they do have a spouse who also works. Everybody who works deserves a decent wage. That person's spouse may end up losing their job, and then that minimum wage job could be the only thing holding that family up. And at 9:25, they're out on the streets. And so I really don't think that it's. I mean, it's not beneficial at all just to start parsing up small scenarios and groups of workers that maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen, when ultimately this is going to raise the bar and raise the standard of living for everybody. And I don't see the benefit. Sorry. Go ahead.
Is there a particular study we can go look at and
in terms of
show that the minimum wage doesn't create jobs?
Yeah. So actually, the Center for American Progress and the Fiscal Policy Institute both did great studies looking at employment and particularly in small businesses and how employment is affected and how payrolls are affected. The names of the studies, they're pretty straightforward, like states with higher minimum wages have faster business growth. Yeah, and they're cited in the packet. And then there's another great study about businesses and business failure rates related to the minimum wage that's in the Journal of Economic Issues that's also cited in the packet.
You might want to say who the average minimum wage worker is.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, that is definitely relevant. To the question of teenagers or people with spouses who may make more, but the average minimum wage worker is not a teenager, and it's not. It's not an uneducated person. The average minimum wage worker is 35 years old. Over 88% of minimum wage workers in the United States are over the age of 20, and about half of them actually have some college education. A good majority of them, almost 50%, so not a good majority, but close to a majority, are actually the primary breadwinners in their homes. So while there are certainly these scenarios that we could say, well, what about this person? What about this subgroup? The fact is that over 500,000 people in Oregon are going to get a raise if the minimum wage is raised to 15. It's going to lift up almost half of Oregon's working force, and that's such a large number. To think that almost half of the people in Oregon who work don't make enough to really even be above the poverty line, and that's really what's important about this, is that we are going to lift almost half of Oregon's working people out of poverty.
So who bears the largest burden, for lack of a better word? Who feels this the most, as far as in a negative way? Who would you expect to?
Sure. Well, I mean, in terms of industries, obviously the restaurant and hospitality industry is the industry that tends to be most sensitive to minimum wage fluctuations. So that's where you would expect, if there's going to be any sort of economic repercussions, small price raises, things like that, that's where you would expect to see it. Maybe even job losses. But I mean, the city of San Jose actually recently raised their minimum wage by $2 per hour all at once. And that restaurant and hospitality industry in the city created over 4,000 jobs over the course of the next year. So again, while it's easy for us to worry about businesses and small businesses, the facts are is when the minimum wage actually increases, it just doesn't. We don't see the negative repercussions. We're out of time. Okay. One more question, and then we're out of time.
With these statistics you're talking about, this is over 50% increase all at once,
yes,
or across a couple of year period. Yeah. I can't remember any minimum wage in my lifetime ever going up $5.75.
Right.
These studies, do they say anything about this huge of an increase?
In terms of a whole, $5 and what is it going to be, 75-cent increase? No. There have been minimum wage increases in the minimum wage history of the United States that percentage-wise were about as large, or larger actually, than about the 60% that we're looking at increasing the minimum wage. But recently there hasn't been any work on increases that large. But in terms of the phase-in, I mean, when you look at it in terms of the 3-year phase-in, it's not a $5.75 jump all at once. You've got about a $2 jump the first year, and then about $1.75, $1.50 the years after. And in terms of that, there is work out there that shows that that these size increases are within the limits that are still good and productive for an economy.
Well, these small businesses, in the past, they've absorbed 25% or 40% increases, but a 60% increase, this is huge. And
right, which is exactly why we're not saying 15 right now. We've introduced a bill that phases it in over 3 years to mitigate, to really mitigate that shock, because $5-6 an hour all at once is a lot.
And across the board of, say, half a dozen employees, this is going to increase the small business owner's bottom line dramatically.
Right, so we're doing it over a longer period. This gives businesses the chance to step up their costs instead of having to have the large increase in cost all at once, and it gives them an opportunity to start reaping the benefits of the minimum wage. As they see over the years of the phase-in, more people in their local areas have more money and are spending more money at the local area businesses. They're gonna they'll see that money come back. When businesses rightfully worry about increased costs, I wonder sometimes if they're only thinking about the cost and not the other side of the coin. Raising the minimum wage means an increase in labor costs, but we also have to look at the money that's going to be saved by these companies in terms of lower turnover and lower training costs, higher productivity among their workers, because their workers are happier and they feel better at their jobs because they have the respect and dignity of a decent wage, and the increased spending that is a result of more people having more money. This is all good for businesses, and it's easy to just look at the cost side of the spreadsheet before the minimum wage increase hits and say, oh, this is going to be tough, but we really need to look at the other side of that spreadsheet and see what are the savings going to be, what's the increased business going to be, and how is all of that going to balance out.
Do you think there need to be other changes to other programs to stop people from falling off this benefits cliff that the governor's talked about?
Sure. As the minimum wage steps up, the benefits cliff could become an issue. We've seen with the LRO analysis that once workers get to 15 actually does prevent them from falling off the benefits cliff. At the end, they actually have more money in their pockets at the end of the month with a $15 minimum wage, unlike 12 or 13. But through the course of the phase-in, the state legislature is gonna need to step up in the next year or two and make some adjustments to the way that benefits are issued and the way that they're pulled back, and work on some kind of phase-in or phase out of those benefits to make sure that when we hit 11, when we hit 12 or 13, that people who are on benefits don't end up with a net loss. Thank you all for coming. We're out of time. Really appreciate you being here. Thanks.